We're diving into the Book of Mormon today.
Specifically, 2 Nephi chapter 18.
Yeah, overflowing with symbolism and prophecy and
Timely messages for sure.
really timely messages.
It's
like it was written for us today.
It really is, and it's fascinating how this chapter speaks to us, across millennia.
Right.
If you can imagine the backdrop, the Assyrian invasion, a period of just immense turmoil and uncertainty for the people of Israel, and yet within this historical context, these profound spiritual truths.
They emerge.
Yeah, and they resonate just as powerfully today as they did back then.
Absolutely, and the chapter begins with a name that's almost impossible to miss.
Oh, yeah.
Mar-Her-Shalal-Hash-Baz.
Quite a mouthful.
It is quite a mouthful,
Oh, yeah.
But it's not just a curious name.
Right.
It's a message in itself.
It is.
In Hebrew, it means swift to the spoil, speedy to the prey.
Wow.
And right from the start, it foreshadows the looming Assyrian invasion.
That's right.
In fact, the very first verse says, "Moreover, the Lord said unto me, Take thee a great roll and write in it with a man's pen concerning Mar-Shalal-Hash-Baz."
It's like God is sending a telegram,
Right.
an urgent news bulletin. The choice of this name, Mar-Shalal-Hash-Baz, is not subtle.
Yeah.
It's a deliberate declaration of what's to come, a stark warning delivered with divine authority.
And to further drive home this point, God instructs the prophet Isaiah to involve a prophetess. In delivering this message, verse 3 says, "And I went unto the prophetess, and she conceived and bare a son. Then said the Lord to me, Call his name Mar-Shalal-Hash-Baz."
So the prophetess conceiving and bearing a son named Mar-Shalal-Hash-Baz isn't just a random occurrence.
Right.
This is a sign, a living prophecy.
Right.
It adds a layer of tangible urgency to the message. It's as if God is saying, this is not some distant future event. It's happening now, right before your eyes.
And this urgency is further emphasized in the following verse. "For before the child shall have knowledge to cry, my father and my mother, the riches of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria shall be taken away before the king of Assyria." Verse 4.
Wow.
Imagine that before the child can even speak, these events will unfold.
It's a powerful reminder of the swiftness of God's judgments and the importance of heeding his warnings, yet within this context of impending doom. A contrast emerges, an image of hope juxtaposed against the looming threat.
Right. Verse 6 speaks of the waters of Shiloah that go softly, representing God's gentle guidance and peaceful presence.
His peaceful presence.
But sadly, the people have rejected this, choosing to rejoice in Rezin and Remaliah's son instead.
It's like they've turned their backs on a calm, refreshing spring to chase after a mirage in the desert. They've placed their trust in human alliances and political maneuvering rather than in God's unwavering providence.
The consequences of this rejection are clearly spelled out in the following verse.
Yes, they are.
"Now, therefore, behold, the Lord bringeth up upon them the waters of the river, strong and many, even the king of Assyria and all his glory. And he shall come up over all his channels and go over all his banks." Verse 7.
So instead of the gentle waters of Shiloah, they now face the waters of the river, strong and many, representing the overwhelming might of the Assyrian army.
It's a poignant image, isn't it?
It is.
The people have traded peace and tranquility for chaos and destruction.
Yes, they have.
And this imagery of a devastating flood continues in verse 8. "And he shall pass through Judah, he shall overflow and go over, he shall reach even to the neck, and the stretching out of his wings shall fill the breadth of thy land, O Emmanuel."
The imagery here is striking.
It is.
This picture of the floodwaters reaching up to the neck.
Yes.
It speaks of a nation nearly submerged in turmoil and devastation brought by the Assyrian invasion.
Right.
And yet, amidst this imagery of overwhelming force, we see that name again. Emmanuel, God with us. Even as the floodwaters rise, threatening to engulf the land, this name shines through.
Yeah.
A beacon of hope in the midst of darkness.
Powerful.
It's a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, God's presence remains a source of strength and comfort.
Yes.
For those who turn to him.
That's right. Even as the prophet delivers these stark warnings, he also offers a glimpse of hope, a promise that those who trust in God will find refuge in his presence. The very next verse says, "Associate yourselves, O ye people, and ye shall be broken in pieces, and give ear, all ye of far countries. Gird yourselves, and ye shall be broken in pieces. Gird yourselves, and ye shall be broken in pieces." Verse 9.
Here is the message to trust God and not associate yourselves with other nations for help.
Right.
What's interesting is that this passage juxtaposes the imagery of a devastating flood with the powerful affirmation of God's unwavering presence. It's like saying, yes, the storms may rage, but even in the midst of the chaos, God is with us.
It reminds me of that beautiful verse in Psalm 46.1. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble.
Beautiful.
And this theme of trusting in God's power rather than human schemes is further emphasized in the verses that follow.
Absolutely. Verses 10 through 13 offer a powerful declaration that human plans and strategies will ultimately crumble, but those who place their faith in God will find security and guidance.
Yes. Take counsel together, and it shall come to naught. Speak the word, and it shall not stand. For God is with us. Verse 10.
That's such a powerful statement of faith.
It is.
It's a call to shift our focus from earthly anxieties to divine promises, and notice how the verse ends. For God is with us, even as the prophet warns of the consequences of disobedience.
Right.
He reiterates this message of hope, reminding the people that God's presence is their ultimate source of strength and security.
Yes, it's like a recurring theme throughout this chapter.
It is.
This constant reminder that even in the face of adversity, even when surrounded by darkness and uncertainty, those who trust in God are not abandoned. He is Emmanuel, God with us.
And that's a truth that transcends time and circumstance, a message that speaks to the very core of our being.
It does.
It's a message that's just as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago.
It is.
As we navigate the complexities of our own lives, facing our own challenges and uncertainties.
Right.
This message of hope is a lifeline. It reminds us that we're not alone, that even in the midst of storms, there's a refuge, a source of strength we can always turn to.
And as we delve deeper into this chapter, we see a stark contrast emerge between those who choose to trust in God and those who rely on their own understanding or seek guidance from questionable sources. Verse 19 says, And when they shall say unto you, Seek unto them that have familiar spirits, and unto wizards that peep and that mutter, should not a people seek unto their God, for the living to the dead?
It's a powerful question, isn't it?
It is.
Should not a people seek unto their God in a world filled with distractions and deceptive voices? It's so easy to be led astray, to place our trust in things that ultimately cannot offer true guidance or lasting peace.
Right.
The prophet Isaiah is urging the people and us, as we read these words today, to turn to the true source of wisdom, to seek guidance from the living God rather than from familiar spirits or wizards.
And that's a message that continues to resonate in our own time, doesn't it?
It does.
We're bombarded with information.
Yes, we are.
With countless voices vying for our attention, offering their own versions of truth and guidance.
So many voices.
But the question remains, where do we place our trust?
Right. Where do we place our trust?
Are we seeking answers from sources that align with God's will? Or are we allowing ourselves to be swayed by the whispers of the world?
The prophet Isaiah gives us a clear answer. In verse 20, he says, to the law and to the testimony. If they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them.
Powerful.
He's pointing us to the ultimate source of truth and guidance, God's word, the law, and the testimony. This is the foundation upon which we should build our lives.
The lens through which we should view the world around us.
It's like he's saying, if what you're hearing doesn't align with God's word, if it contradicts his teachings and principles, then be wary.
Be wary.
It may sound appealing.
Right.
It may promise quick fixes or easy solutions.
Yes.
But ultimately, it leads away from the light, away from the source of true peace and fulfillment.
The consequences of rejecting this divine guidance are clearly depicted in the verses that follow.
Okay.
Verse 21 says, And they shall pass through it, hardly bestead and hungry. And it shall come to pass that when they shall be hungry, they shall fret themselves and curse their king and their God and look upward.
Those who turn away from God, who choose to walk in darkness rather than light, find themselves hardly bestead and hungry.
Hungry.
They experience a spiritual famine, a void that nothing in this world can truly fill.
That's right.
They fret themselves, consumed by anxiety and frustration.
Anxiety and frustration.
They curse their king and their God, blaming everyone and everything but themselves for their predicament.
And yet, even in their despair, they look upward.
They do.
A faint glimmer of hope remaining, a recognition that perhaps there's something more, something beyond the misery they've created for themselves.
But their gaze doesn't stop there. Verse 22 says, And they shall look unto the earth, and behold trouble and darkness, dimness of anguish, and they shall be driven to darkness. Their search for solace on earth only leads them deeper into despair.
Wow.
They find themselves surrounded by trouble and darkness, their lives filled with dimness of anguish.
It's like a downward spiral.
It is. They've become trapped in a cycle of their own making, driven further and further away from the light.
It's a sobering reminder of the consequences of choosing our own way over God's way. But even in the midst of these warnings, even as he describes the bleak reality of a life lived apart from God,
Yeah.
the prophet Isaiah doesn't leave us without hope. He reminds us that even in the darkest of times,
Yes.
there's a path back to the light, a way to escape the clutches of despair.
And that path is found in returning to the law and the testimony, in aligning our lives with God's word, in seeking his guidance above all else.
Right.
It's in recognizing that he is Emmanuel,
God with us.
even when we've strayed far from his side.
Throughout this chapter, we've seen this beautiful interplay of warning and hope,
We have.
of judgment and mercy. It's a message that speaks to the very heart of the human condition.
It does.
Our tendency to wander, to make choices that lead us away from the source of true joy and fulfillment.
But it's also a message that reminds us of God's unwavering love,
Yeah.
his relentless pursuit of his children, his willingness to offer redemption and restoration no matter how far we've strayed.
In a world filled with noise and confusion,
Yes.
with countless voices vying for our attention, this chapter offers a powerful reminder of where to find true guidance, true peace, true hope.
It's a call to turn away from the whispers of the world and tune in to the voice of our Creator, to ground ourselves in his word, to seek his face, to trust in his promises.
And as we do, we'll discover that even in the midst of storms, we're not alone. He is Emmanuel, God with us, a beacon of light guiding us through the darkness, a refuge in times of trouble, a source of strength for the journey.
A beautiful truth, isn't it?
It is a beautiful truth.
That no matter where we find ourselves in life, no matter what storms we're facing,
Right.
God is with us.
He is.
He doesn't abandon us in our struggles. He walks with us through them, offering his strength and guidance every step of the way.
And that brings us back to a central theme in this chapter, a message woven throughout these verses like a golden thread, the importance of seeking God's will and aligning our lives with his teachings.
It's a theme that's especially poignant when we consider the consequences of rejecting God's guidance.
Right.
As outlined in those powerful verses describing the fate of those who turn away from him, verse 21 describes them as hardly bestead and hungry, their lives filled with frustration and emptiness.
They fret themselves and curse their king and their God.
Right, blaming everyone and everything but themselves for their predicament.
And in verse 22, we see them look unto the earth and behold trouble and darkness, dimness of anguish, and they shall be driven to darkness.
These verses paint a stark picture
They do.
of the spiritual wasteland that awaits those who choose to live apart from God's presence, who reject his guidance and seek fulfillment in things that ultimately cannot satisfy.
Right. They wander aimlessly searching for meaning and purpose in places where it can never be found.
Exactly. They become consumed by anxiety and fear, their lives shrouded in darkness and despair.
But for those who choose to trust in God, who seek his will and embrace his teachings,
Yes.
a different path unfolds. Remember those earlier verses where the prophet Isaiah calls upon the people to place their faith in God alone.
I do.
In verse 10, he declares, "Take counsel together, and it shall come to naught. Speak the word, and it shall not stand, for God is with us." And in verse 13, he urges the people to sanctify the Lord of hosts himself, and let him be your fear, let him be your dread.
These verses offer a powerful antidote to the anxiety and uncertainty that grip those who rely on their own understanding.
They do.
They point us to a source of strength and security that transcends human limitations, a refuge in times of trouble, a guiding light in moments of darkness.
When we choose to sanctify the Lord of hosts himself, when we make him our fear and our dread,
Right.
we align ourselves with his will, and in doing so, we find peace and stability, even in the midst of life storms.
It's a profound message of hope and encouragement, a reminder that even when we make mistakes, even when we stray from the path, God's love and mercy are always available to us. He's Emmanuel, God with us, a constant companion, a source of strength and guidance, a beacon of light leading us toward his presence.
This journey through 2 Nephi chapter 18 has been filled with powerful insights and profound truths. We've explored themes of warning and judgment, but also of hope and redemption. We've seen the consequences of rejecting God's guidance, but also the blessings that flow from embracing his will and aligning our lives with his teachings. And as we conclude our exploration, we're left with a powerful reminder that even in the face of adversity, God's presence is our ultimate source of strength and comfort. He is with us always offering his love, his guidance, and his unwavering support.
So as you navigate the complexities of your own life, remember the messages of hope and encouragement found in this chapter. Seek God's will, trust in his promises, and allow his presence to guide you through every challenge and every triumph.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration. Be sure to follow our podcast and subscribe for more discussions like this one.